Give us just a moment as we allow everyone else to enter. People are continuing to enter, so let me give it just a couple more moments.
You know, Rebecca, it seems that Zoom is taking longer to do onlining or like loading than it used
Onboarding.
to. Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's part of their some of the new protocols they have in place.
Possibly. I know for any of those of you that were with us in March, you understand that security protocols are really important. And I still apologize for that, but thank you for being with us through that. But we understand security protocols now more than ever. Just a couple more people, we'll get them in and get started. I also understand that I don't know about where you are, but it is a gorgeous fall day here. And I can imagine that people would maybe have other things to do than share time with us, even though, hey, I think we're awesome. But and Frank really will be. So I know many of you are excited to see him, and I can't wait to introduce him. But we do have a few pieces of business first. So we'll get started with those. Again, thank you so much for being here. It's the REIA Now update, and we really appreciate your joining us. As I said, we know you have plenty of things to do. We appreciate your taking time to spend with us. Today, we'll have with us Ryan Kuhlman, our National REIA President. Charles Tassell will also be with us, who is our both CEO or COO and our VP of Legislative Affairs. Matt Keelen will also be joining us with the Vogel Group to give us a little more insight into some of our legislative progress. And Frank Rolfe will be here from Mobile Home University. I expect that's why many of you are with us today. It is an exciting topic as we move forward. Just a quick disclaimer. Although you will hear financial concepts today and certainly some other items during the legislative update that have to do with law and finance, we are not experts in the field. And if you have specific advice, you need to see someone who will actually give you advice for your own situation in your own state and locale. So please see a professional if you have those questions. We are here to promote, protect, and educate. We're a nonprofit trade association that's been around for getting closer to 40 years now. And we're here to serve you. We have locations in about 120 local chapters. Over 40,000 of us come together nationwide. This broadcast and many of our other events are sponsored by Home Depot Pro. They're a terrific partner for us. They have special programs for investors, 20% off paint at the register, rebates that are very, very specific to us, and some other things that they do with us as National REIA members. If you have questions about that and many other things, then you should reach out to your local REIA if you're not already a member. The easiest way to do that is to go to the National REIA website at nationalrea.org and click here on I'm an investor, and then find a local REIA if you are looking for that specifically. If you want to learn a little bit more about us, you can click the wide join button and get a great overview. Now I'm going to turn it over to Charles Tassell to give us a bit of an update on where we are legislatively. Take it away, Charles.
Thank you, Rebecca. Logjam Central. That's the short version of it. Let me just start there. I've been kind of mentioning that we are literally getting down to days away from the midterm election, which will then be a lame duck session until we get to January, but things will hopefully be moving forward. Even as we had our meetings up in DC in September, and I'll bring Matt Keelen on, who is our DC lobbyist here momentarily, and kind of update on a couple of things, including HR 5013, and kind of laying the groundwork for that next year and preparing for it. But I also want to mention a couple of things. People have been asking about HUD pushing for no criminal background checks and asking on that. That's part of why we did our August and September meetings, and just kind of bring that back as a refresher, whether it's on the pets, companion animals, service animals, that aspect of it, or looking at what should you not do. I encourage, if you don't remember this, look back at those sessions and with Rent Perfect and some advice that they gave on that. Again, credit background checks, criminal background checks, making sure you're doing them correctly. So HUD is definitely moving forward with more testers in those kind of situations. And depending on the communities and municipalities, they are getting a little more active. So just heads up and be aware on that. I do want to mention to you that there has been a effort by the regulatory bodies within the government, specifically HUD, to push for mandatory 30-day eviction notices to be made federalized, basically. And they're drawing that from legislation that was supposed to have been sunsetted back in June and July of 2020, and they have continued to keep it out. There is a lawsuit that is moving forward, and National REIA is looking at joining into that lawsuit as well. So just FYI on that. It's hanging out there, and the precedent of it being out there and being spread and federalized, again, this is a state issue. It should be local and state only. It does not need to be federalized, and the feds need to get out of this. It's beyond their authority, which is something I'll mention also. Yesterday, if you happen to see it, CFPB got smacked by the 5th District in a unanimous ruling. It was very interesting because one of the highlights to what the judges said was the CFPB, which was set up in part of Dodd-Frank, was actually there's an inappropriateness in it because it's what's classified as double insulated. In fact, they are not required to receive their funding from Congress, which the Constitution says specifically Congress does the oversight and appropriations, specifically laid out literally word for word like that in the Constitution. But hey, we can ignore that and just pass that on. And they can get their money directly from the Fed as long as they don't ask for more than 12% of the Fed's budget, which, the Fed budget, I'm not sure what that means either, depending on when the printing presses are running. So it's kind of a mess. And by the way, oh yeah, Congress can't oversee them or provide any oversight on CFPB. And that's where the federal judges said, no. So again, this is a first step. It's a long time coming, but this is part of that move that has happened with a more originalist Supreme Court. So this is one of the benefits to it that may kind of rein that organization in a little bit. Again, more to come on that. Don't think that CFPB is gone. It will take more than just one ruling from one court or even a district to handle that. So, but with that in mind, as I say, elections have consequences. We've heard that phrase, and it's been popularized. But with one coming up, I wanted to have on. I asked Matt Keelen to come on and join, and Laura, I don't know if you can help him pop up here and join. But asked Matt to join us and speak on this issue of the elections and what's coming. And we got a couple of what do you call it? What are those websites, web pages? No, Zoom pages. I can't even talk. Insights. How about that? We'll start there. Matt, welcome. Thank you for taking time with us. Share a little bit of what you're seeing on the DC side of things.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. Like he said, a bunch of folks were in to talk about our bill on seller financing, and an interesting fact about that bill is two of our lead champions, both of our Democrat co-sponsors, happen to be in what are called toss-up races. Right now, the battle for the House of Representatives is decidedly leaning toward it switching over from a Democrat majority to a Republican majority. And unfortunately, those two gentlemen find themselves caught up in that potential red wave of House seats. So that's Henry Cuellar in Texas 28 and Vicente Gonzalez in Texas 34. Currently, if you look at what handicappers are saying, there's about 20 seats that they think are going to flip fairly easily from Republicans to Democrats. Republicans only need to pick up 6 seats to get the majority. And then there's another 38 seats that are in the toss-up category. And both of those gentlemen are in there. Of that 38, only 6 of those are Republican-held seats. So you could see where that red wave that people talked about earlier in the year is rebuilding, at least when it comes to the House races across the country. A lot of important Senate races, one right in Charles's home state there, REIA's home state of Ohio. JD Vance is somebody that we got to spend some time with, was very supportive of the seller finance legislation, some of the other things that Charles got to speak to him about. I think he's had an opportunity to follow up with him. He was very interested in possibly being the Senate champion of our legislation come next Congress. So that's one that people should definitely pay attention to. There's several other key Senate races. I'd say the Senate is still in a place where it's a toss-up, it's a jump ball, and there's going to be a lot of close races. I think JD Vance will end up picking up that seat or holding on to that seat in Ohio. Right next door in Pennsylvania is Oz versus Fetterman. Fairly likely, we don't know that evening who wins that race. I think it's going to come down to a 1 or 2 point race, and it's an important one. It's the number 1 seat that Republicans currently hold that the Democrats are trying to take away from them. If they do that, it goes from 50-50 to 49-51, and the Republicans would have to pick up 2 seats to gain the majority. There's a couple of seats that they feel pretty comfortable about. If you see that map that Charles has up, this Real Clear Politics, which I think is the best site to handicap these races, projects Republicans to have 52 Senate seats. So they do project a flip of the Senate as well. The 2 seats they see turning from Democrat to Republican are the Georgia race with Herschel Walker and Senator Warnock, and then out in Nevada with Adam Laxalt and Kathleen Cortez Mastro. That race, Laxalt has been ahead just outside of the margin of error for about the past 3 weeks. So the Republicans feel pretty confident about that one. Georgia is probably the, heavyweight title fight of this election. So much money has been spent down there. It's extremely nasty. The good thing for Herschel is he has a popular governor running at the top of the ticket. So I think that's going to help him. Governor Kemp is projected to win by 6 to 8 points. And there's not a lot of Kemp Warnock voters out there. So I think Herschel's on his way, but it's not going to be easy for him. It's been a really tough election, tough on him and his family. And I think that's another one that will go late into the night. I mentioned the governor's races. There's several really key governor's races. Democrats likely to pick up seats in Maryland and Massachusetts. Some people may say, oh my God, the Republicans had governors in Maryland and Massachusetts, but they did, very popular governors that couldn't run for re-election. There's some interesting ones out there right now. The governorship of Oregon, Republican is running about 4 points ahead. It's an interesting race with 3 people in it, and 2 of them are Democrats, so they're splitting the vote. So there may be some, red splotches on the map that surprise you come the day after Election Day. New York is another one of those big races. It's very close. There's a lot of reason for people to be upset with New York, particularly with crime. Lee Zeldin, who has been a friend of the Seller Finance Coalition and the REIA over the years, is running there and is within the margin of error as the Republican. So that would be a massive upset for the Republicans to take the governorship of New York. And the other one I think that, people should watch is the Florida governor's race. Florida's always been a really tight electorate. People remember the 580 vote difference in the presidency in 2000. And Barack Obama won it twice, and then Trump won it twice, but both of them won it by no more than 2 points. I think Governor DeSantis down there is likely to win by over 7, maybe even in the double digits. And he's very likely to continue to be the name that is most associated with running for president on the GOP side, other than former President Trump.
So Matt, along those lines, we're talking about these different races, and there's a lot of chatter. The 24-hour news cycle does that in some sense, creates, the red wave, and then is it dissipating? Is it coming together? As we get into the last couple of weeks, what is it people should be looking for in polling to really find out? I mean, what's real?
So if you look at the top 5 issue sets, in the late summer, we heard how the red wave was dissipating and how the Roe versus Wade decision was going to turn the election into more of a referendum on that issue and benefit the Democrats. But if all across the spectrum, all the polling that is done, the listing of issues, as everyone on the phone could probably imagine, inflation is the number 1 issue. It's not even close. Jobs and the economy are number 2. They kind of go hand in hand. Those 2 are well up over the 30s. And right below it is crime. And below crime is immigration. And then below immigration is abortion. So the issue set is definitely indicating a red wave. And the president's approval numbers are abysmal across the board, but they're abysmal, particularly in states that the Democrats are defending. So, he just campaigned with John Fetterman yesterday. It was the first targeted Senate race that had campaigned with the president in the last 4 months. So that gives you an idea of, usually you can get the president out and do a rally and raise some money, but these candidates are being forced to run away from those issues, and particularly the inflation issue and the price of gas. So I think on the House side, there's likely to be a significant wave. Senate races are a lot tougher. The most of the Republican candidates are being outspent 3 or 4 to 1. And the incumbents that are running are tested candidates, so they're not going to be easy to beat. I think if the Republicans get 52 Senate seats, that would be sort of a wave election for the Senate. But where you're going to see the biggest wave will be in the governorships and in the state houses. You may remember during Obama's presidency, Democrats lost about 1,000 elected Democrats across the country in his 8 years. And I think they're about to lose back a lot of what they won in 2018 in some places that they probably shouldn't have won. But, President Trump was unpopular, particularly in the suburbs, that election, and cost them a lot of seats. So you're going to see more of the red wave on those local and governor's races. And then the House, I think the House is going to go decidedly Republican.
Laura, if we can go ahead and go back to the last one, the House slide. Thank you.
Unfortunately, some of our friends are on the chopping block, though, and that's, if there's folks that want to have pro-business Democrats still be in Congress, helping out Henry and Vicente would be tremendous at this point, because they're both in really tough races. They're both right along the border. Immigration issue is killing them, and if I had to project today, one of them would likely lose.
I found it very interesting, Matt, when we were in DC, Brad hit a number of different fundraisers. One of them was Quaylar's, I believe it was in the evening, and there were actually more Republican congressmen there than there were Democrat congressmen there. It was interesting.
I will tell you, just insider information, most Republicans would say, listen, if we get the majority and Henry wins, that's not a bad night, because they do want to be able to have a Democrat to work with, and he's the Democrat that all the Republicans feel the most comfortable working with. He is the guy that is typically the co-sponsor of pro-business legislation. The progressives spent $17 million to try to defeat him in the primary down there. So he's a courageous, pro-business conservative Democrat that is, if he does win, will be in a pivotal point come this next Congress. And, our relationship and friendship with him, I think, will allow us to try to move some bipartisan legislation forward.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because while we were in DC, there was a discussion we had on HR 5013, and actually a lot of tension. I will mention to everybody, it was an excitement tension on one side of the aisle and a despair tension on the other side of the aisle, a frustration. And it was very interesting, the two interacting. You made sure you knew which office you were walking into before you said anything to start off. With that in mind, Matt, you want to touch on kind of ideas on what some different folks are saying regarding HR 5013?
Sure. So if the House does flip, Andy Barr, who is our lead Republican sponsor, will be a subcommittee chair on the Financial Services Committee. He's likely to get the subcommittee that our bill would have to go through to pass. And the Republicans want to go back to regular order. So that will be really important for us to just gain some momentum on getting the bill done. He's already talked to a gentleman, Patrick McHenry, who's now the ranking member on the Financial Services Committee and will be the chairman if the Republicans take control, about moving our bill. And they've been enthusiastic about doing that. So that's a really positive sign. On the other side, I've told you, our two Democrats who have been our champions are both in a tough election. A really bad night, we lose them both, and then we have to go try to find new friends. The Democratic conference has moved significantly to the left. And some names that you guys may recognize is Alexandria Cortez and Tlaib and the Squad. So the fear is that after losing, they may jerk further to the left and not to the middle, which is where most of the country is right now. Unfortunately, the Republicans and the Democrats seem to pull too far to the right or pull too far to the left when they get the majority, or when they go into the minority in a significant way. So the hope is that those two guys hang on and we're able to move this in a bipartisan fashion through the House. And then what we're going to really need to focus on is getting a Senate champion, which we did a lot of that when Charles is up here in DC. Have several senators that want to be the lead, but have deferred to folks on the banking committee. So we're going to focus on that come next Congress. Andy Barr feels really strongly that we'll be able to get this thing through committee and through the House early in 2023.
So let me address something real quick. You said after the election, and assuming the Republicans take leadership role, then at that point, who do you think will be potentially speaker and or leader on either side of the aisle?
So Kevin McCarthy, very likely to move up from minority leader to speaker, which would mean Steve Scalise would move from minority whip to majority leader. On the Democrat side, I think most folks, R's and D's, think that if the Democrats lose the majority, Nancy Pelosi will retire pretty quickly and may not even be able to win a vote in her conference to be the minority leader. So that would leave Steny Hoyer, who kind of represents the old guard of the Democratic Party. I don't think he's likely to be the next minority leader. There's a gentleman named Hakeem Jeffries and Steny Hoyer has been more of a moderate, slightly pro-business Democrat, but somebody that's a legislator willing to cut deals. This other gentleman, Hakeem Jeffries, is much more progressive, much more combative, much more anti-business Democrat who is likely to take Steny on in that race. And I think given where the conference is going, there's not a lot of progressives are going to lose in November, but a lot of moderate Democrats and, the pro-business Democrats are the ones that are in the tougher districts. So that their conference is likely to be much more progressive after this election. So the leadership of their party will likely reflect that.
Interesting. Thank you. Matt, I'm going to go back to a question. How many years have you been working in DC and on the federal side of things?
Too long. About 25 years.
So a little bit of insight there, knowledge going into this. I just want to speak on that issue. Chat questions, raising arguments to the contrary. I just want to point that out. So when you talk about real reality of what's going on, this is what we're seeing, folks. This is what the reality is. We need to make sure we're moving beyond the talking points and the things that try to separate folks and focus on our issues as business issues. And that's where we want to stay on. To that end, I do want to come back to HR 5013. We had a question, which is we're been familiar with them, a little too used to it, so I just referenced that. It is Access to Affordable Housing Act, as brought forward in this case. Is actually the bill has evolved from the Seller Finance Association, and we've been in partnership with them since the beginning. And this is a bill that you can actually on National REIA's website through our Action Center can actually be seen and shared as well. So you can go on and reach out to your congressman and encourage them to join and co-sponsor it. Again, this year isn't really, we're not looking for movement this year, but this is logjam time. Things will be wrapping up soon. And then we'll, again, look forward to moving things under a new structure. And who knows, even on, keep an eye on Real Clear Politics. There's a lot of discussion back and forth. Thank you, Lori, for posting that. A lot of discussion back and forth of what's going to happen, how tight are things. We've all had a lot to do hearing from pollsters who this is what's going to happen, and it doesn't hit anywhere near that. So even on Real Clear Politics, where they're taking polls from a variety of folks in different organizations, understand that those are still pollsters, and some of them are biased. Some of them do have an agenda. So an average of those polls is probably a better pulse, but it is still a flash in a poll, and there are people on either side of the aisle that do not participate in polls. So, and that is known and recorded. So something to consider. So
Charles, can you do a just super quick
Yeah.
for those who may not have been with us over the long haul and understand what the seller finance, how we originally started with that bill and what the provisions might be. Can you just do a really quick overview of what we're trying to put forward and why?
Sure. In our elevator pitch we were just in DC, summarizes this. And I will mention, thank you, Jeff Watson, for a tremendous amount of work on this issue over the years on this. The simple focus is the SAFE Act and Dodd-Frank limited seller financing, which means selling your property on an agreement, no bank loan, you actually become the bank, you sell it to somebody else, limiting you to only being able to do 3 of those in a rolling 12-month period, which for a lot of our folks who build up a small portfolio of properties, when they go to retire, there's an issue of, I want to unload it over the next year or two and then go into retirement. Well, you're only allowed to sell 3 yourself. And especially when we're talking folks who are unbanked, especially in the urban cores and out in the rural areas, this is more typical. That's why we've actually had broad bipartisan support from representatives in both of those areas. If there's a bank loan that's under $100,000, and especially under the $60,000 to $70,000 range, typically Dodd-Frank has added so much regulation that the banks really don't want to do those loans because it's not cost effective. They can't even make a profit at it. So they do not want to do those. So if we have properties, and I know to my coastal folks, there are properties out there, there are houses out there that sell for that price range. So bear that in mind. But where's my Mississippi, my Missouris, my Midwest folks who can go, yes, there are $50,000, $60,000 houses still and people want to buy something like that, and it's a starter home, and this is a first step on the rung of building wealth. So being able to sell those, and especially when you've got somebody who's self-employed, doesn't always fit in that little cubicle or square for the bank to get a mortgage to, or if they're, just unbanked and bad credit for whatever purposes, but you've been renting to them and you decide, you guys come to an agreement, seller finance it, well, you're limited to only doing 3 because of Dodd-Frank. So this is a laser focused tweak to Dodd-Frank, allowing from 3 into an increase of 24 in a rolling 12-month period. So that is the seller finance bill. I do want to mention, just Matt, do you have any other wrap-up comments, final things to suggest or insights?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say, Charles, and you can attest to this, the members of Congress really respond to business owners in their district. So getting out and voting, getting involved in the campaign, volunteering, making sure that you eyeball that person that's running and tell them why it's important to you is critical. We're back in an economy where anybody that has a few employees and is putting some economic activity into a community is important. And the more that we build those relationships, the more powerful we're going to be. We have a great story to tell, but if we don't tell it, then it doesn't matter. And nobody can tell your story better than you can.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Matt, for that. Appreciate it. We'll let you get back to work you're doing there, even on a Friday afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
So I do want to mention one other thing. I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca on this, but you guys might remember about 3 months ago, we talked about the idea that there will be chattel mortgages possibly coming out. And in this process, the White House has asked HUD, which has asked FHA to start a process of developing a way to do chattel mortgages. Now, what that is a chattel loan is typically a personal loan for a prefabricated or modular home, or heaven forbid I say the word, a trailer. Yes, a trailer. So, but we know that by that language, so I'll just mention it that way. But FHA is looking at that, and especially with the movement, the increases in value, there is definitely a push to do that. And Rebecca, I don't know if you want to touch on some of the new increases in that from an economic perspective.
I'll make it really quick. I just want to let you know that we know that mobile home investing is important to many of you. And so Brad is doing a great job at keeping you updated on any developments that are coming through. And our next presenter will talk a lot about that. But I wanted to bring your attention to 2 news pieces that Brad has posted on Real Estate Investing today. That'll come up in the chat. Either Lori or Brad will put those links up. But one is talking about the FHA proposal to increase loan limits for Title I manufactured home loans. And so that's in mid-October. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development announced that FHA is proposing a new rule to increase and index the loan limits for Title I manufactured home loan program, which ensures loans used to finance manufactured homes titled as personal property. According to their release, loan limits for the program and will be described in the article that Brad has there. So you'll see those links in a moment. The other thing that was incredibly interesting and makes today's presentation even more exciting is an article about mobile home values rising nearly as fast as single family homes. And again, that entire article will be there in the link that's I think in your chat bar already. I can't see and talk at the same time. Yep, Brad's already got it there. So those articles are there for you to reference for the presentation today. But I'm going to turn it over to our president to introduce our speaker. I know many of you have been excited about this. We did have some discussion about this 9 months ago-ish. But Frank has a whole different perspective and lots of experience in this category. So we're very excited to have him join us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Well, first, let me test my microphone. Is it working now? Okay, everybody can hear me great. It is actually funny, Rebecca, because just yesterday, my business partners and I were sitting down, we were talking different investing, multifamily, and of course, mobile home parks came up as well. The interesting thing is Frank's been doing this for about 20 years, maybe a little bit more. Started with his first mobile home park in Dallas, Texas. And he and his partner, Dave Reynolds, has now grown to over 250 communities in 25 states. So the way that I relate that to being a mentor myself is that if you're going to learn anything about investing in mobile home parks, this is the guy you need to learn from. So thank you so much for coming today, Frank, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. You all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for spending a few moments to listen to mobile home park investing. It's a area of alternative investing that many people don't ever consider seriously or think about because we all suffer from a stigma against it in many parts of America. But, I know you have many things to think about in life. And so I'm glad you want to devote a little time to the mobile home park industry. Stemming off what he just said, just to give you some background, because I know that when I listen to people, I want to know their qualifications to make sure it's worthy of me to listen to. I've been in the industry, as he said, for about 25 years now. I bought my first mobile home park in Dallas called Glen Haven. I bought it because the deal seemed attractive, but I knew nothing about the industry. It was $400,000 with $10,000 down. The seller would carry $390,000 for 30 years. And I was more excited about the financing terms than it was the deal itself. So I started with just that one property, then I bought another. It's kind of like Lay's potato chips. In 2010, I merged with my partner, Dave Reynolds, and we kept on buying up mobile home parks. Today, we're ranked somewhere around the 5th largest in the US. So that number changes all the time. We're in the top 10, not sure where. We own a lot of properties. We're in a lot of states. In fact, I added up once. If you took all of the streets in our parks and connected them all together, the street would be 100 miles long. So that means we manage 100 miles of paving, 100 miles of utility lines, 100 miles of power lines. So that's what we do. Along the way, I'm one of the few people who's ever agreed to talk about the industry. My partner and I thought all the way back in the early days, in the mid 2000s, that the industry needed some kind of voice because no one would talk about it. It was getting pummeled and beaten constantly because it was just complete lack of direction. So we started to be the ones who would talk to the media. The media would come calling. They'd say, hey, your national association called MHI is hiding from us. Would you talk to us? And so that's why suddenly I started getting calls, started with the New York Times. New York Times actually lived in one of our parks for a week. We had no problem letting them do it. They got to pick the park. We said, just pick any off the list. We're not afraid of our product. They stayed in the park. They love staying in the park. He wrote a glowing article. He called me the encyclopedia of all things mobile home park, and said that my partner and I were the best things going in the affordable housing industry. And then subsequent to that, I've been on many other media pieces, sometimes beaten up, other times praised. In modern times, more likely beaten up than praised. I was on John Oliver's show where he called me the biggest a-hole in America today. I've gotten lots of bad press from a lot of groups. I just tell it like it is, and you make your own decisions with that information. So it's a little background. My title of this speech is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of Mobile Home Park Investing, just to give you a range from A to Z of how it really works, what you have to watch out for, what the rates of return are, and all that kind of thing. So let's just jump right into it. So it started with the good attributes of mobile home park investing. The number one good attribute which was the first thing that attracted me in my very first park, Glen Haven, was what Warren Buffett calls the moat. And by that, he means something that protects your business. So in Warren Buffett's world, a good business has a giant moat that all the competing businesses can't get through. It's got water in it, alligators, big spikes, everything else to protect your business. And the mobile home park industry has the best moat of all time. And that's that no cities will allow you to build new ones. So the number of mobile home parks is set in stone. There's about 44,000 in the US. The number declines annually as they get torn down to be redeveloped into Home Depot stores and apartment complexes. I knew that because when I bought my first park, Glen Haven, prior to that, for 14 years, I'd built the largest privately owned billboard company in Dallas-Fort Worth. And so I was very, very used to reading zoning maps. And I noticed I never saw MH zoning. It was the rarest zoning you would ever see. The only thing as rare as that was landfill and of all things, veterinary clinic. It's really hard to get a veterinary clinic zoning in Dallas. So I just thought, how weird that this zoning is so rare. Therefore, every mobile home park must have some value, because based on supply and demand, who wouldn't want to buy something that there's so little of? And that's just a fact. Now, the reason cities banish it is not for the reason you think. A lot of people think that cities don't want mobile home parks because it brings in objectionable low-class people. That's not really the reason. The reason is that they lose a tremendous amount of money with mobile home parks, just a vast sums. We had a mobile home park, for example, in Arnold, Missouri. We've subsequently sold it. And that one park, if you ran the math, if you said every kid in there costs the school district $8,000 a year in tuition, and every lot in that park, we pay, the lots were valued at $50,000 a lot, and the homes were valued only about 5 or 10 because they were really old. Missouri's a 1% tax state. So they were swapping 500 to 600 of tax revenue for somewhere between $8,000 and $16,000 of tuition based on how many kids were in the house. So when you added it all together, what was the number? It was $1 million a year. So they were losing $1 million a year just on that one mobile home park. Cities are effectively broke anymore. They cannot afford to lose $1 million on one property. If you stood on the property and spun around, what did you see? You saw a hotel. Well, how does that hotel work for the city? Well, they get tax revenue, and they get sales tax, and they get liquor tax, and they get lodging tax. They make money on that hotel. And then next to that was a strip shopping center. What's it do? Well, they get property tax, they get sales tax. It makes money for the city. There's hardly any use in the city that loses more money for the city than a mobile home park. And that's why it's capped. And that's why you'll never see that change. Right now, you see different speeches from people in the administration and stuff, and Marcia Fudge at HUD, and, oh, they're going to make cities undo their ban on mobile home parks. They're going to green mail them. Well, good luck on that. You know, if you talk about giving them little tax incentives, it takes more little tax incentive to force yourself to lose $1 million of property. So that's why we have that scarcity. And so the moat is the one initial big one. Another one is that mobile home parks have really high rates of return. You may say, well, how high? Well, the gold standard is a 20% cash on cash return. In fact, if you cannot hit that, most people aren't going to buy a trailer park because it's not fun. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look good on your resume. So people are only in it for the money for the most part. And mobile home parks are one of the few asset classes you can still get the good old American 3-point spread between cap rate and interest rate. And so that's an important feature for them. So as a result, when you're buying a mobile home park, you're going to get a pretty good rate of return if you're a smart shopper. On top of that, you can grow your rents every year. Even before inflation, our industry still raised our rents up significantly annually. You typically always have ways to cut costs. Moms and pops you buy from normally are not doing it right. We sub-meter water, sewer, cut manager cost, fill vacant lots. So the next reason it's a good business is simply the very high rate of return. I don't think there's anything else that has as high a rate of return in real estate as mobile home parks. I'm not familiar with some of the strange algorithms of real estate, such as a boat marina. So I can't compare myself to things that I don't know, but I do know compared to apartments and single family, I'm sure mobile home parks beats the socks off of just about everybody just based on rate of return. Next, which a lot of people would not imagine, is we have plentiful financing. You never hear about mobile home parks going unfinanced these days, but when I got in the industry in the mid-90s, they went unfinanced all the time. Banks didn't want to finance them. If you even said the word mobile home park, they'd slam the phone down on you. Since that time, Sam Zell got in the business in the mid-90s, and wherever Zell goes, American Lending goes. He's the largest owner of apartments and office buildings and now mobile home parks in the US. So he ushered in conduit debt, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all kinds of good stuff. So your typical park today, you can choose if it's under $1 million deal. You can choose either seller financing typically or a small town bank. If it's $1 million and up, you have access to conduit, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. So the financing is very strong. In fact, mobile home parks are in a race annually neck and neck with self-storage for lowest default rate, which is why lenders love it so much. Next, you're buying mostly, not always, but most of the time from the original moms and pops who built the parks. So as a result, you're able to buy them at low prices, and they'll often carry the financing. And that's something you can't get in a lot of other asset classes because you're talking to a younger person who recently bought it and they paid X and they're not going to sell it for less than X. They'd be crazy. So their profit is only the difference between X and Y, what you pay. But in our industry, they have no debt. So if I buy it from a mom and pop for $1.3 million or $1.2 million or $1.1 million or $1 million flat, they still pocket $1 million. So it's just a whole different negotiation. We find a lot of our sellers are more enthused about bonding than they are the numbers. And bonding means basically getting with the seller, making them like you. And when they like you, they'll do great deals for you. But that's one interesting attribute is we work in an industry of people who are mostly greatest generation, although they're dying off quickly, and what is called silent generation, born during the Depression. That's the bulk of our sellers. So as a result, we get really good pricing typically, and they often will seller finance. Another big item is the demand for affordable housing. I'm sure everyone on this call is fully aware that American housing prices are completely out of whack with what people make. It depends on the market that you're in. I live down in southern Missouri, in the Ozarks of all places. And down in the Ozarks, the houses are about 150, 180 grand. That'll buy you a decent house. But in other parts of America, like Dallas and Orlando, and you name it, home prices are far, far higher. The average home in America is right around $400,000. And the average apartment right now, according to a recent report I read, although I'm not sure I believe it, was about $2,000 a month was the average. But let's just say that housing has become very, very expensive, and the average American is really pushed to the max to pay these new prices, and mobile home parks provide them that chance to live, all bills paid, for a few $100s a month. And that makes our demand crazy high. We have mobile home parks that get up to 100 customers a month, and we don't have any product for sale or for rent. So that's just the stream of people with no advertising who just come to our office and they say, hey, have you got anything? And the managers record when they come by, and many of ours get 100 calls or drop-ins, and we don't even have anything. That's how high the demand is. Also, in general, mobile home park industry right now, for the first time in its history since the 60s, is hot. It was hot, if you're not familiar with the industry, back in the 50s and the 60s. There was a moment in which the demographics of people who lived in mobile home parks were higher than single family. Elvis Presley lived in a mobile home park in 2 movies. It happened at the World's Fair in 1963 and Speedway in 1968. Elvis himself owned a mobile home park that he lived in down in Memphis. In fact, his mobile home in the mobile home park went to auction a couple years ago. Priscilla Presley says Elvis was at his finest in the mobile home park. He was much happier, more fun to be around guy in the mobile home park. He probably should have ditched Graceland and lived in the mobile home park. But that was during that one period in time where Frank Lloyd Wright designed a mobile home, as did Raymond Lowery and many other people. That era is long gone now. Okay, I admit it was about half a century ago. But suddenly, after half a century of being completely dormant, the industry is once again gaining interest and respect. So those are the good attributes. The bad attributes are, in no particular order, number one, the media, which just absolutely hates mobile home park owners with passion. I would know because I've talked to many of them, been on many programs of all variety, where they think that mobile home parks are the absolute worst example in America of the little guy with the hat in the Monopoly game beating up on the poor downtrodden, which is completely erroneous. Our average customer makes about 50 grand a year. They would make it sound on these media things that our average customer makes about $700 a month. But that's one issue that's bad, is you are, when you are a park owner, you are always in the crosshairs of every media group, every city councilman, you name it. They hate your guts. The city wants to get you out of town because you're costing them $1 million a year. The media wants to get you because right now, with all the woke spin that goes on things, people all want to use mobile home parks as the ultimate poster child of the rich beating up on the poor, which is completely untrue. But it doesn't matter what you say. That's the articles they bring out anyway. Next is the political spectrum out there. A lot of states, blue states, are always saber rattling. They're going to beat up on park owners by enacting rent control. A few have, not many, but it's a constant thing you have to worry about every year. Illinois brought it up last year, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times, but never passed it. Iowa did the same, but they passed laws that did not include rent control. But then you have New York, which, did rent control for pretty much the whole state, not just mobile home park owners. But the whole political climate right now is beyond scary. And being a landlord in today's America is a terrifying position to be in. But, maybe that will change with the midterms. I have no idea. Another problem that's bad with mobile home parks is that it is so expensive in a post-COVID world to fill your vacant lots. And the only way we can fill our vacant lots is by having the park, buy the homes and bring them in and then sell or rent them. But those homes have doubled. So prior to 2020, the cost for us to bring in a mobile home onto a lot in a park was somewhere in the mid 30s. And today that exact same home on the exact same lot is running about 60 to 80. And the problem is our customers' incomes haven't doubled, right? So they make the same money they did back in the day. So back when they were making, the 40,000 household or whatever they had, they could afford the lot rent and the home from the 30s. And that was all great. But now the problem is the prices have doubled, their incomes haven't, and many are having trouble getting approved for financing. So it's very difficult. It's very capital intensive to fill vacant lots today. It is very difficult to get the home sold. Now, 21st Mortgage, which is a part of Warren Buffett's Clayton purchase from back in the mid 2000s, that's your number one financing source for mobile homes and parks. And they have a wonderful program called Cash, which fronts you all the money to fill your vacant lots if you qualify for the program, but you still have to get the home sold. And that's just been one big failing. In fact, the government has over and over again said they were going to create conditions in which our customers could buy homes and bring them into our lots and get us out of the loop, but they fail every time. They can never seemingly get those programs done. Some other items that can be bad for mobile home parks are just a few realities that you need to know. The first one is on infrastructure. People drive through mobile home parks all the time. We own 100 miles of the stuff, and they don't take enough precautions or just even get in depth on how mobile home parks are constructed. And they're not all built the same. You have private water versus city water. City is obviously superior. You've got city sewer versus a variety of private sewer systems. You got septic, packaging plant, lagoon. None of those are that great. Septic is maybe the best of the crew. And then even the line construction, on water, you've got PVC versus galvanized metal. And on sewer, you have everything ranging from PVC to Orangeburg to early failing PVC, cast iron, and clay tile. You just have to have a handle on how these parks are built. People get in trouble all the time because they didn't. I've had calls from people who didn't even know they had private sewer systems. I get that frequently. People call me up, they find my number online, they'll say, hey, I got a problem with my park. I say, what's wrong with it? Oh, I don't understand what's going on with the sewage. It's not flowing. I called the city. And then I just say, well, what do you think you got? Oh, I don't know. I said, do you see anything on your property that looks a little bit like a cattle watering pond thing? Yeah, I got this water feature. I said, well, that's not a water feature. That's probably a lagoon. That's your sewer system. And you're topping it, something's wrong with it. So not knowing your infrastructure issues are huge. Another issue is density. Mobile home parks, back when they were built, back in the 50s and the 60s, the mobile homes were much, much smaller. They ranged in width from either 8 to 10 feet in width, and the typical length never got more than about 60 feet. The modern homes are 14, 16, or 18 wide by 76 feet long. And so they won't fit on those lots. And if you buy a park with high density and new homes won't fit on your lots, you can't fill the lots. If you have a storm blow through and blow all the homes down, you can't put the homes back on the lots. And if the homes are too close together, the fire marshal might shut you down. So you got to really understand what your density is. Also, you want to understand your age of homes. Mobile homes, some mobile home parks have nothing but the old early version homes, what are called pre-HUD homes built before 1976. And other versions have all new homes in them. And the problem is you don't want to have all of either one. You don't want to have all new homes because that means people have big mortgages. They can default, have the homes repoed, nor do you want the really old homes because no one really wants to live in them that much. So you got to make sure you understand the homes and how the age of the homes ties into your purchase. Location is critical. People in mobile home parks are no different than you and I as far as what locations they want. Everyone in America wants the same thing. They either want a fun but safe urban location, or they want an upscale suburban location. They don't want to be in dangerous urban, nor do they want to be in downscale suburban. But for some reason, a lot of investors think that mobile home park people are different, that they don't think like normal people. So somebody who would never think to live in that location themselves will buy this mobile home park near downtown. It's too dangerous to even get out of your car. And then they can't figure out why they can't retain customers or sell homes. And you should know, if you wouldn't live there, then you shouldn't be the buying that location. That's a terrible idea. And then finally, economics. The economics of mobile home parks are pretty cut and dried and pretty simple. There's not that many line items on the cost side, not that many revenue generators other than the lot rent or homes if you have some homes that are park-owned homes. And from that, you have to derive your net income, apply a cap rate, and that's the price. It's not a game where you're trying to buy mobile home parks because you think they're hot and they'll just keep going up in value. They only go up in value based on net income. If they don't have more net income, they don't have any more value. I hear people all the time and see people who massively overpay for parks. It's not uncommon today to see people paying $100,000 a space for mobile home parks, but there's been some situations in America. In one case, someone paid $1 million a space in Florida. I think we'd all agree that that's really stupid. There was a deal not too long ago where someone bought a mobile home park in the Los Angeles metro at a 0% cap rate. Again, what are you thinking there? How do you do that? So you got to always be mindful that mobile home parks, at the end of the day, they are an income property business and nothing more. And so you've got to buy things that make money. If you're not making money with your park, then no one's ever going to want to buy it from you because they can't make any money with it either. Some of the ugly items on mobile home parks you may or may not be aware of. The first one is permitting. You think because you see a mobile home park, you think that therefore, it has a right to be there because you say, well, that park's been there for 70 years. Surely it's got a permit. Well, you'd be shocked over the last 25 years, how many mobile home parks we find do not have actual operating permits or licenses. It's mind-boggling. Did a deal on a park down in just north of Fort Worth, Texas. Large property, over 100 lots, built in the 1960s. Doing our diligence, went to the city, get a certificate of zoning. The city tells me, oh yeah, that park, that thing's totally illegal. We're just waiting until the guy sells it because he's well connected to the city fathers. As soon as it sells, we're shutting it down. You can imagine if you were the lucky buyer of that one, day after closing, you get a certified letter from the city that they're shutting you down and you have X days to comply or they're going to fine you. And over again, you're going to find parks that are missing the all-important state license, city permit, certificate of occupancy. You have to be very, very careful for that. I do not know why parks got away with it. In a lot of other things, you could never build an office building without a permit. There's no way that would be ever possible. They would have inspected each part of the building. But in mobile home park world, because we're such a low use of land, right up there with like a driving range, because we are a parking lot, a lot of cities, if somebody had a lot of gumption and they thought they might yell at them or sue them or hit them, back in the early days in the 50s and the 60s, when American city governments were kind of weak, kind of poor, just starting out, they just let these people bully them and they just let these parks sit, but they'd have this vendetta to shut them down later. So you don't want to get stuck in that. Another big one in mobile home parks is environmental pollution. You would not think that mobile home parks pollute because they don't produce anything. The problem is a lot of the park owners over the decades in cost-cutting measures created sometimes horrific pollution. An example of that, well, we had a park under contract and we found as we were doing our diligence and did our phase 1 environmental, it came out dirty because the guy had actually been burying his own trash for some period of years, therefore creating his own landfill. We see that frequently, not to mention cases where mom and pop had all kinds of unusual thoughts on life. They would often put in their own gas tanks, things like that in order to make it more convenient to fill up their car. But about 1 out of every 100 mobile home parks fails environmental assessment. That's way too high. If you fail in environmental, then what it means is if they ever catch you, you'll have to pay for the entire cleanup. And even though you didn't cause it, and that would bankrupt most people. So you got to do a phase 1 environmental, and you can't buy a park that's dirty. That's never going to work. Also, you got to be very, very careful around private utilities because the amount of money is so much bigger than you would think. A packaging plant, which is a feature in which the sewage comes in one end and then it comes out the other end, 98% pure, being treated to UV light, chlorine, and other factors. Those things, which look so friendly, can cost easily $500,000 to $1 million to replace. That is a huge amount of money for something that most buyers don't even realize or think that there's any danger to them. So you have to be very, very careful. Septic is the least costly of the different options, but even septic, if If you have to replace the leach fields, it can be easily 5 to 10,000 per leach field. You have to replace the tanks. If it's a lagoon would easily be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. You have to be very, very careful on private utilities. Typically, water well doesn't come back to bite anyone, thank heavens. The wells are typically about $50,000 to rework. So that one's survivable. But private sewer is terrible. There's another feature in many, many mobile home parks called the lift station. The lift station is a cylindrical concrete tube in which the sewage all goes in from the park. And then there's pumps that pump it upstream to the city's main. They have to do it because sewer can only drain down. And if the park sits lower than the city's main, which it seems to do most of the time, you have to push it up to the city's main. And again, those things are chock full of risk, exposure, anxiety, and cost. So it's all these little hidden infrastructure items, which typically revolve around private utilities that can really come back and get you in the end. Another issue is just simply paying too much. We see this all the time. I once got a call from a bank. The bank called me up and said, I'll pay you $1,000 and all of your costs to come down, walk a mobile home park for 1 hour and answer one question. Well, you know, I got to do that, right? Because that's just, who wouldn't do that? I got to know the question. So we arranged a day and I went out there. They picked me up at the airport, took me to the mobile home park, walked around the mobile home park. And then the guy asked me the only question they wanted to know, how much is it worth? I said, I'm not an appraiser. They said, I don't want you to give us an appraisal. I want you to give us your opinion. You're an expert on the stuff. What do you think it's worth? I said, okay, well, let me ask you a question then. How much is the land worth? He said, well, we think the land is worth about $400,000. So I said, well, the value of this park would be $400,000 less the cost of you kicking everyone out, demolishing every home, and putting a big old fence around it to keep anyone from getting into it till you can get it sold to be redeveloped. The guy said, why did you think that? I said, when we were walking around, did you notice such issues as that the homes are connected to the water with garden hoses? Yeah. Did you notice all the fluids dripping out of almost every home? Yeah. Did you notice that you have extension cords that are running the power between the homes? Yeah. Do you notice those homes are not even tied down? They're just sitting on bricks. They're not even legally tied down at all. He goes, yeah, I saw all that stuff. Yeah. And I said, but beyond that, you have an even bigger problem. Well, what is that? Well, do you see that thing over there on the front of the park? Yeah, well, that's an old gas station. Why do you say that? Because parks had lots of gas stations in the front back in the 50s and the 60s. Can't you see this, the oval concrete thing? That's where the pumps were. So he's like, okay. So I said, I'm also saying the value would be everything I just said, less the cost to remediate your environmental pollution site. So he goes, gosh darn it, that's kind of what we thought too. And I said, well, why did you pay me $1,000 just to come out and tell you that which you already know? He goes, because we're just so bummed on this deal. And I said, well, how much does the bank have on this thing? $4 million. I said, how the heck do you have a $4 million note on this piece of trash? And he said, well, the appraisal came in at $5 million. So, you know, that's the problem is here's a bank, the most conservative of all American institutions, and even they paid too much because they gave the guy the note to buy that crazy park. You have to be very, very careful. Again, you know, a lot of people get so excited about mobile home parks, they think the whole trick is to buy a park. No, any idiot can buy a park. The whole trick is to making money with it. You can't make any money with it, don't buy a mobile home park. They don't appreciate like that. They're completely struck to income. Final item I thought I'd talk about is debt and the risk with debt right now. So, you know, mobile home park loans typically range in length from, you know, 3 to 5 year on a lot of seller financed and bank deals to 10-year, even up to 12-year with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so one big time where the park business can get really, really ugly is if your loan comes due and banking is really hard to obtain. And we've had such stable banking for so long now, since 2008, roughly, after everything hit the ground. So make it maybe 2010. For 12 straight years, banking has been the easiest thing on earth. We had very stable interest rates. Bankers were just happy and it was all happy. And that was all crushed this year. So if, you know, the whole real estate industry changed dramatically, as did the whole mobile home park industry, because we're part of that. So you have to be very careful on debt right now. I would not want to buy a mobile home park with super short debt. A lot of sellers who will carry paper will say, I'll carry the paper, but only for a couple years. Don't touch that deal. I would think right now you want to lock in a fixed rate as long as you can humanly get. So don't accept that. If a seller says, well, I can only give you 3 years, then say to him, well, here's the deal. If I agree to 3 years, you have to agree to let me have the right to buy an extension of that for another 3 years. And when you buy an extension, all you do is you agree when it comes up, when it comes due in a balloon, you'll pay a little extra money down towards principal to extend the note out, in this case, for a few more years. Why? Because you need to buy as much time as you can. I am not a political person. I heard the speaker before me was talking politics. I stay totally out of politics. I don't even want to get involved in politics. But we got some real issues in America right now. And even if Republicans win control of Congress, either in one or either branch, these situations like this take a long time to cure. I'm assuming I'm not the only one on the call here who survived the transition between Carter and Reagan, but it didn't get cleaned up overnight. It took a long time to fix. And you do not want to cut it too tight right now on your lending, where your loan comes due at the very moment that everything is in the toilet. Because I've been there before. I had a business back at the time of Reagan where rates went to 18%. If your loan came due, you were in a heap of trouble. You were just praying that your loan, by the time your loan came due, the rates would be back to normal levels. So you have to be very, very careful. In mobile home park world, one of the most common defaults, because most of the times the banks are very conservative on underwriting, are what are called term defaults. And a term default simply means you cannot find a replacement bank. You made your payments every month, everything's fine on the park, but you can't find a replacement bank. And there's nothing more troubling than when you did everything correctly and the market just shifted. And now you want to be rewarded with your new loan because you earned it, because you did everything perfectly, but the lenders aren't making loans anymore. You have to be careful for that too. Bottom line to it all is that, mobile home parks are a great investment. They're nothing like what most people imagine. If you are near any of the cities that we're in, and we're in a lot of them, you should visit the mobile home parks out there. If you've never been in one, don't go to just the one that you know because it's so horrible and you drove by it on the way to Home Depot once. Yeah, I know there's parks like that in every city, sure, but you got to look beyond those to the mainstream parks. And if you go to Google and put in mobile home park in blank, whatever your city is, up will pop a bunch of dots. Just pick some of those dots and drive through, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, because our parks are just like high density subdivisions. They don't look like mobile home parks. Our people don't drive nasty cars. There's not junk piled in the yard. There's nothing like that. A lot of people get their vision from mobile home parks from the movie 8 Mile by Eminem. Eminem is a Missouri native, right? So you have to like Eminem just because he's one of our most successful artists of all time. But he's also a big liar about 8 Mile. If you saw the movie 8 Mile, which was set in a trailer park, it looked like a giant dump of old, rusted, single wide homes, beat to death, burned up cars, people throwing beer bottles at each other. When I was at one of our parks in Michigan not too long ago, just for fun, I found Eminem's address online. And so I went to his mobile home park that he really lived in, and it looked nothing like the movie. It looked like a senior retirement center. And clearly that doesn't help you when you're trying to be a gritty urban rapper to say, yeah, I grew up in a senior retirement center. That doesn't really sell tickets. But most Americans have been brainwashed on what mobile home parks are all about. So I'd urge everyone here, if you're thinking at all about investing in it, but you're kind of on the fence, go tour some of the product. Our average customer has a nice house, a nice car, a clean yard, no problems whatsoever. The level of play on parks has gone up enormously over these past 25 years. I mean, we've bought and turned around 250 properties, but we're not alone. There's many, many, many people doing this stuff. And you'll be shocked that most every mobile home park you'll drive through, it's not scary, it's not depressing, it's not downscale, it's just perfectly fine. So I guess the moral of my little talk here is simply that, if you're pondering the mobile home park industry and investing in it, you just got to do a little more exploration, drive around, look at the stuff, better understand it, because we are all saddled with a terrible stigma. Case in point, when I bought Glenhaven, what was the first thing I did? I have it under contract to buy. So what have I got to do? I'm racing the clock to get a concealed handgun license. That's the whole key. Run down to a gun store, buy a semi-automatic pistol, buy the ammunition, go to gun class, pass the class. Because I'm just sure that at Glenhaven, I need that gun so bad, because that's what the American media would tell me. And lo and behold, after owning Glenhaven for only like 1 week, I realized I was more at risk of shooting myself in the leg than needing to ever use the gun. So I dismantled it, put it in the car, never to be seen from again until many, many years later. But that's my own stigma that I suffered under. And thank heavens, I did not let that stand in the way of buying that first park. And I don't know if y'all have any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has if they have it. Although I'm so low tech, you'll have to just ask me the questions because I don't even know how to read the screen.
Frank, we do have one question, if we could, please, that I'm seeing.
Sure.
They're asking, by the way, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.
You bet.
Such a great topic.
Good.
But the first question that we have is, how do RV parks compare to mobile home parks? Can you address
Great question. Yep. Let me tell you all about it. It's really strange because if you look at historically, mobile home and RV parks are all the same family. They did not have any differentiation until roughly 1960 something. And the way they broke apart is kind of crazy. What you had a manufacturer called Selby in Ohio that made RVs. And he had a wealthy customer who said, hey guys at Selby, could I buy an even bigger mobile home park to outdo the Joneses, or RV to outdo the Joneses? And Selby said, well, like, what do you mean? And he said, well, could I go like 10 feet wide instead of 8? So Selby called up the state of Ohio and said, hey, state of Ohio, can I put something wider than 8 on the road? And they said, yeah, of course you can. People do it all the time, but you can't pull it behind a car. You'll have to have a special one-time move permit. So tell the guy, if you really want, yeah, you can build him a 10-foot RV. Well, that was when the industry broke up, because when they figured out you could go 10, then people who were going to live in these things permanently, who weren't pulling them behind their car, all said, oh, I want that creation. And those who were real RVers said, no, I want to pull it with my car. So when the industry kind of broke up, it went in 2 different directions. So did the personality. The RV industry has always been very highly thought of. It's considered extremely upscale, extremely positive. Media loves RVs. They had His and Hers RVs in the Neiman Marcus catalog a few years ago. RV's done a tremendous marketing job with their Go RVing campaign. And mobile home parks, what do we have to show for it? We are the black sheep of the family times infinity. I mean, at Thanksgiving dinner, we're the member of the family no one will even talk to, but the RV guy, well, he gets all the adulation. So the RV industry has always had a different personality than we have. And it's for many RV park buyers and owners, that's one of the benefits is it's an industry that's basically just built on affluence and happiness. So when you own an RV park, it's an entirely different experience than owning a mobile home park. In mobile home parks, you have to do such things as evict people. In RV parks, you don't evict people because people prepay you or pay by the day and they have no problem. And the worst thing that would ever happen is your credit card got rejected because they thought it might be stolen. They hand you a different credit card. The way RV parks are bought and sold is a little different than mobile home parks. I will tell you that. The cap rate is typically 2 points higher than mobile home park because the lenders are a little more concerned because things go in and out. But if you buy an RV park that's down on its luck and bring it back to life, it doesn't require any capital to do so, except on any common area improvements. Because unlike mobile home parks, where it costs you $10,000 just to prepare a lot for occupancy in many states, RVs don't cost you anything. So you can take an RV park that's at 50% occupancy and you can get up to 85% occupancy. It doesn't cost you anything out of your pocket. It's very much like a regular business. Now, because it's like a regular business, it requires better management because it is a regular business. And if you do a bad job, if you're like a restaurant that maybe the chef goes bad and all the food is burned, people just don't come back. And whereas in a mobile home park, where you're just a parking lot, where you pay people by the month to park their mobile home, the manager's role is not that important to you. But there's nothing wrong with RV park investing. We own some RV parks. We own some RV parks, which are actually freestanding giant RV parks. And we also own some parks that have RV sections in them. And we also own parks where there's some RVs intermixed with mobile homes.
Thank you for the answer. We also have a question about do you just rent the homes? Do you rent the spaces? How do you operate that?
Okay, well, in the park business, you want to be just renting land. That's everyone's dream, is where you rent the land. So your customer is a stakeholder in the business. He owns the home and you own the land. So you both care. That's why our collections were so high during COVID. People did not want to lose their homes. So apartments, the person might say, well, I'm not going to pay my apartment rent during COVID. I'll game the system. And then when it all ends, I'll just throw my mattress in my pickup truck and I'll escape paying $20,000 of rent. With us, if you didn't pay, you'd lose your mobile home in the end, and we'd take it. So it's having the customer as a stakeholder is a positive, but you don't really want to be in the mobile home renting business as a park owner if you can help it, mainly because you don't make that much extra money by renting the home. If you take the lot rent and push it to the market maximum, and then take the true cost of repair and maintenance, tax and insurance, there's not a huge delta between all that. So we typically, from a management perspective, prefer to be just renting land. But that being said, people have different business models. One of the REITs, UMH, they have a division which just rents mobile homes. And there's a lot of mobile home park owners that actually do what we call the detached apartment model, where they only rent the home and lot and do not just rent the land. So I leave it up to you which model you actually prefer. Our company, we prefer the parking lot model, but there are people who prefer the detached apartment model. So it's up to you.
There's lots of thank yous here for you.
Great.
But another question. I was told that these homes are classified as vehicles. Do banks consider mobile homes an asset or a liability?
Okay, well, when you get a mobile home park loan, your loan is all based on the land. That's what they're going to have as their first lien position. Sophisticated banks never take the homes into the loan pool. Mom and pop does, and sometimes small town banks do. So it's up to the bank whether they find the mobile home an asset or not. I would imagine they would all consider it an asset, but the larger banks, they don't value them and they don't normally encumber them with debt. But some states, most states, they do have the mobile homes fall under the vehicle section as far as licenses and permits. In Florida, you actually have to put a little sticker in the window of the mobile home like you do on your license plate on your car. Many other areas have gotten away from the vehicular definition they think is kind of demeaning. So a lot of your northern states where the customers are more affluent, like in Wisconsin, for example, no one would ever refer to a mobile home as a car. And there they see mobile homes as a perfectly satisfactory form of housing, and they would not use that reference. So it just really depends on where you are. In most states, they are personal property in all states, but some states align them. Like if you were to call about something to do with your mobile home, you would call the vehicle department, but in a lot of states, they don't do that.
Frank, we really, really appreciate your being here. It was a very informative program. I know lots of people got lots from it and had many of their questions answered just from the presentation itself. We've gone sailing a little over what we would usually have, but I know everyone was enjoying it so much. We just let it keep going because it was so good. But
Sure.
Thank you again for being with us. Thanks to all of you for joining us for the presentation today. Remember, it is recorded and you'll be able to get some of those other questions re-answered by watching again, because I know he covered so many different things in a really compact amount of time. So you'll be able to revisit that when Lori sends the link out. Thanks again for being here. We really appreciate each of you, and we will then see you next month. Have a great one.